Cool. So let me know what questions you have.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. Background in public health. I recently got my master's in health promotion last May. I was considering medical school for a while. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. But I wanted to look more into health as like an overall system. So I wanted to see how I can impact that as a whole. And I looked into a lot of like PhD backgrounds and research and opportunities. And I felt that that's something that I'm way more interested in. So right now, I'm really interested in public health and global health. But I'm very new to the PhD world. As I mentioned in my video, I don't really have anybody that I know who has PhD or in my family. So I'm kind of new to this whole world. And I saw in your video online that you're very open to speaking with people about your experience and just answering questions. So that's why I wanted to hop on a call with you and to chat.
Well, that's super wonderful. I totally identify with your story. I myself am a first generation college student. My parents don't know anything about, anything beyond third grade math, I think is where the it stopped. So
Mhm.
I think that's why I'm so passionate about helping students and being open to meeting with students because I know exactly what it feels like when I was applying to PhD programs. I knew nothing and I really had to like grasp for anything and was navigating through the dark. So anything I can do to help shed light on anything, be happy to help.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I had a question about just like I wanted to ask questions based on like your application process and also like how PhD school, like the process of PhD school and also post PhD school. So, um, do you mind if I ask you about like your application process and
Yeah.
what told you what you wanted to study and what you wanted to get your PhD in?
Um, that's like even before the application process then, because you're asking like what made me even
Hmm.
decide to go for a PhD and pursue my research topics. Well, so when I was in my MPH program, I did a summer internship that was required for my program. And at that time, I was like, okay, I'm interested in like health education, adolescent, young adult health, risk behavior broadly. Not really sure where that's going. I was able to find a summer internship at Stanford with my current mentor actually, who was doing work in health education in schools, but around the topic of substance use and specifically tobacco prevention. And that summer also was the same summer that the adolescent e-cigarette epidemic exploded. So it was kind of like I was in the right time in the right place, and I fell in love with doing adolescent substance use prevention research because I was like at the forefront of figuring out like why everyone was using Juul that summer. So super fun. I felt like a detective and I was like, wow, like I always thought research was boring. This is like the total opposite. I loved it. And then my mentor was like, if you want to be she's like, what do you want to do someday? And I'm like, well, I want to be like you. I want to start my own lab and also teach and mentor. And she's like, okay, well, yeah, you need a PhD to do that. So, of what made me go for a PhD and why I chose to focus on, adolescent substance use prevention as my research topic, and still am researching that to this day.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, and I think that's very inspiring, and I think it's very impactful, and especially like the niche group that you chose. I think that they could use a lot of research, and I think that's fantastic. And that's kind of what I was So I am where like I have a bit of imposter syndrome, and it's very difficult because I've heard that you need to have specifically exactly what type of research you're interested in. I have research experience with working with global health and also like demographic mapping, but I haven't worked in like a lab with a mentor or somebody. And I'm wondering, are those things that I require in order to apply to PhD? Like, do I need to hone in more deeply? That's yeah.
What do you mean by like you don't have like, so what is the research experience you do have right now then on those topics?
So, for the global health, that was an internship, and I'm wondering, like, is that enough, or do I have to have more,
Wait,
in order to like
I mean, it sounds like
apply?
research teams and mentors like that you were a part of, right? I guess I'm confused like why you don't think I'm sorry for whoever told you that those aren't legitimate research experiences. They definitely are. And I think when you explain that in your personal statement, you just really highlight the research experiences, the research skills, the methods that you learned um, and have from those internships and whatnot.
Okay, great.
I
That's
think it's
definitely
enough.
amazing. Yeah, I
I only had my one summer internship, which was 10 weeks long. I mean, I didn't highlight that in the application, but it was a 10-week long summer internship. And that was the bulk of what I talked about in my personal statement and what I really like talked about when I was networking and interviewing. And yeah.
Okay, that's helpful and very reassuring. Yeah, the person I spoke to just made it seem like PhD was impossible, so I was getting a little scared. But I appreciate that validation.
No,
Do you
of
mind
course.
if I ask a bit about, thank you. Do you mind if I ask a bit about your application process and like
Yeah.
what helped
Before
you
we
pick
do
the
that,
school and
though,
program?
I just want to pause and say
Mhm.
that whoever you spoke to who told you that was discouraging you from applying to PhD programs, I'm like, I don't know who that person is. Nothing against people should not be saying that to student like especially like what you just described to me is like a lot more experience than even I had when I was applying and what most people have. So I know it can be hard, and I'm really again sorry that you had to, someone had to say that to you, made you feel a certain way, but just know that you are more than enough. And I don't want you to feel inadequate in any way. You definitely have the experience, and I want you to feel confident going into this application process that you do have what it takes because you do.
Thank you. That means a lot. That's very, very helpful. I just started to get really scared and I was like, I knew that I was really interested in doing PhD, but I felt that like I was so like easily influenced by people who had different like interpretations of PhD. So I was like, okay, this person doesn't think so. So automatically so, but that's what pushed me to reach out to you and reach out to more people because like I was like, there has to be more. I know that like I just need to figure out what I need, but to hear that it was enough and I don't know if that
Again,
helps a lot. So
I don't
thank
know
you.
why there are people in this world who probably have PhDs that are going around telling people not to get them. I don't know why that's happening. I'm sorry. I'm glad that we're chatting now. But yeah, you got this, is
Thank you.
I say.
Thank you. That means a lot, Jessica. I appreciate
Anyway,
it.
okay, sorry to interrupt you. You can go back to your application questions.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I just want to ask about your application process and also how you picked the program and mentor and that experience.
So before I dive into this, because we'll be on this call for hours if you really want me to get in depth on that, have you found my step-by-step blog where I talk about my application process? Is this really?
I didn't get to watch that video yet, but if that is basically the answer to this question, I'll definitely check that out
So
after this
it's
call.
It's not a video. It's like a website where I like put a step-by-step guide in words in text of what I did from start to finish applying and then getting into a PhD program. So I'm going to drop that link into the chat right now. Please
Awesome.
go there. And I think that will be a much more easily digestible way, and it's all kind of there for you to read at your own pace. And then if you have other follow-up questions, you can just email me. But it's all there.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I'll definitely look. That's a very helpful resource and not stuff that I've seen out there. So thank you so much. Um, but I wanted to also ask about like your PhD experience. So, like, what are the 4 years like, and what advice would you have for somebody who's like trying to evaluate? Because I another thing about what I'm trying to evaluate in this process is like, am I know that people go through like a lot of it's a lot, it's tough. And I'm just trying to evaluate, is it best to apply now and like or should I wait some time?
So to answer that question first, before I even answer your bigger question, I'm always a fan of like just going for it. So I'm going to be biased towards giving you that kind of advice. I feel like if you have the passion and the desire now, keep that momentum up. Because the longer you wait, like that's what happened to me. Like when I graduated from undergrad, I was like, I'll eventually go back to grad school. I'm taking no more than 1 year off. And then one gap year turned into two. And while I don't regret the two gap years I took, like I was so close to that like third gap year happening, and I think that would have been a little too much for me. Um, Back to your question about what to expect in the PhD years. So, first year to generally first 2 years is going to be pretty much heavy coursework. Um, and that's pretty normal across the board. I would say the first year is definitely the most coursework. Second year gets a little lighter. You get to pick your classes a little more, and then you can start doing other things like TAing or some research assistantships. And then generally at the end of your second year, you take some sort of like qualifying exam. And that looks different at every school. But generally, it's kind of like a very long take home essay. You can kind of think of it that way. And then you start to put together your dissertation aims. You defend your aims, and then once you pass that, then you are just free to work on your dissertation until you're done. And that timeline is all based on you and your mentor. So that's kind of what to expect in terms of like a structure of a PhD program very broadly. Do you have questions more specifically? I don't know how specific you want me to get, because otherwise, again, we'll be sitting here for hours chatting about the experience play by play.
Yeah. Well, I guess I wanted to ask, is this something, because I hear a lot of jargon in terms of like grants and like finding funding for your research, and those aren't things that I'm very experienced with or know how to do exactly. So I'm wondering, like, is this something that I could like they'll teach me how to do all that stuff, or is this something that I have to know getting into PhD school?
I barely know how, okay, I shouldn't say that, but I'm like learning how to write. Okay.
That's
Get
good.
training on that during your PhD. I did apply for an F-31 when I was a PhD student, but I like really was not prepared to do that. But I did it anyway. Still a learning experience. So yeah, definitely, don't worry. You don't need, I didn't even know what a grant was when I was applying for PhD. So again, whoever's whispering in your ear saying like you need to know exactly how to write a grant before you can be a PhD, then I don't know what program to do. Yeah.
That's
So
good to
I would
hear.
not worry about it. A lot of programs are also, you should also not go to a program that's not going to guarantee you funding. Um,
Mhm.
so that's also another thing to consider too, is like you hopefully will not have to be writing grants to support your own stipend throughout the PhD.
That's helpful to hear. Thank you. That's very comforting. And in terms of like the coursework for year one and two, in relation to, because I saw that you had a master's, is it similar to like the coursework from your master's, or do you think that it's like more intensive and requires like way more effort?
I think it's pretty similar. Like there were
Pretty
master's
similar.
like in
Okay.
classes that I was taking. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's good to hear. Wow, this is great. This is definitely very reassuring and very
Yeah.
helpful.
I mean, like there
Fortunately,
was one quantitative class that was like just for our PhD program. That was probably a little more intense.
hmm.
Other than that, like everything else is like you're mixed with other master's students for the most part.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I now I wanted to ask a bit about the year three and four, in terms of doing more independent research and like working more with research. What's that like? And was it a process that they guided you through to work with people at the school that you were at? And yeah, just what was your experience like?
I loved finishing coursework and just being able to do my own thing. Some
Mhm.
people need like I can get freaked out when they're like, oh my God, I don't have to be anywhere all day. But for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to like just go to the grocery store at 2 o'clock and then go to the gym. Like, I don't know. I was very much in love with the
Mm,
flex schedule and not feeling like I was in class all day.
mm,
Um, I TA'd, so I mean, funny enough though, I still was like so busy and like running around all of Boston, like, during
mm.
my two dissertation years, because I was TAing and teaching fitness classes and doing all this stuff. So I
Awesome.
still had things that kept me going. And then like some of my seminars would happen in person, so I have to go to campus for that. So it really just depends. Um,
Oh,
and
that's good to hear.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I love flexibility. I hated being in I like because at that point, I had taken like I had just done my 2 year MPH and then went straight into the PhD. Took even so it was like 4 years of classes. I was like so
yeah.
excited to be done with that. Um, and yeah, it's really nice. Love, I'm pretty like self-motivated. So like I liked just again being able to work when I wanted to. And I was more productive that way.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, there's not a lot of structure though. Like I will have to say, like you do have to create that for yourself.
mhm.
And sometimes like I had to sort of be the one driving the timeline of my dissertation, all of that. I mean, your mentor will as well, but like you really have to be the one to put like I was like, I want to defend on this day. So what do we need to do to get there, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
that's really good to hear. That's good to hear about like the uh like times in PhD school because like when I used to be interested in MD school, I know that like you basically didn't really have much time to breathe. But it's good to hear that you still have that flexibility and you can still like manage a life outside of school. So that's really good to hear. And so I wanted to ask about life post PhD. Like, how has that been? And like, is it easy to apply your PhD? Do you think it was necessary?
Well, I guess I'm in a very so I'm doing a postdoc now, which is a
Mhm.
pretty common thing to do after your PhD. Some people did go off and like work in consulting and industry and other stuff, and they're all very happy to. So that's another option. Um, I mean, so that's why my like your question doesn't really make sense for me because like it's not like I had to get a PhD. Like this is kind of just like the next step in terms of like my training. Um, and it was a pretty smooth transition. I felt like my life is pretty similar to like what my life was like when I was doing my dissertation, but I'm not TAing as many classes, if at all, and I am like working on different projects, not just my dissertation and the other research I was doing. So, and I'm in California instead of Boston. Like it's like my life,
Yeah.
but in terms of like the kind of I get to decide what my projects are, create my own schedule, like prioritize my time. Like that's kind of all same. And I still have a research mentor that's guiding me through, helping me write grants, training me on stuff. So, yeah, that's post PhD life, and it can be very different for very different people. And I would just not worry about that at your point right now. I would that is something that, will be a, transition when you get there. And just know that no matter what, when you graduate and you get that PhD, that just opens many doors for you, regardless of what you end up doing with your career.
That's really good to hear. Yeah, because after talking with like people that I know and my family, they don't know really what PhD is. So they're wondering like, is it worth it? Especially because you are living on like a stipend for 4 years. So they're wondering like, is it necessary? But that's good to hear that like it opens a lot of doors. I believe so too. And I think that it definitely increases a lot of opportunities. So thank you for that validation.
Definitely.
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
PhD is the highest doctorate degree you can get,
right, exactly.
technically higher than an MD. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I wanted to ask about life as a postdoc and like research in general, and as like that's part of your career. What does that look like? Like, are you doing research every consistently, like that's your whole thing, or is it a combination of multiple things?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm doing a mix of working on different research projects. Some of them are most of them are mentored by my current professor mentor at Stanford. Um, I've honestly been spending a lot of time learning how to write grants and submitting grants, so that takes up quite a bit of my time. And I'm also doing quite a bit of teaching and mentoring too. So I would say that it's a pretty good split between those things.
That's great. That's awesome. Um, that's good to hear, and I think that that sounds awesome. So when you were doing research as well as like year three and four, what does that look like as well? Like, is that something that you're part of a team and you're kind of contributing to like a white paper, like published research, or are you basically like learning research skills and how to be in a lab and or how to be in like a public health lab?
That's a great question. So this is really up to you and how you, it's also very different. Like some of my cohort mates, like their mentor has like a really giant, like robust lab space with a huge team that they joined, and there's like other research assistants, postdocs, etc. I didn't really have that. My mentor was doing great research, but kind of was like more different projects and kind of not like one central lab. Um, so I think it depends on kind of your main mentor. I also like went out and just like found side research projects on my own and like joined other research groups to expand my collaborations, which yielded a lot of manuscripts for me. So I don't regret doing that. Um, so I think it's good to also just network and see what other research projects you can be a part of that are outside of your department or your program. Nothing's stopping you from collaborating with other people. And people are always willing to mentor PhD students because they're contributing to the future leaders. So um, did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely that helped. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Um, and that sounds really exciting. Now that I'm like getting my gears going about research about PhD, I feel much more confident in terms of applying. I was looking at schools to apply, and one of the programs that I'm really interested in applying is the population health program that you were a part of throughout your PhD experience. So I wanted to ask a little bit of if you have any advice in terms of applying and in terms of specifically to the program that you experienced and how overall, like, what was specifically your program experience like?
There's a lot of questions in one. You might have to restate some of them. So advice on applying to my population health science program specifically.
Hmm.
Honestly, I don't know to this day why they accepted me. I don't, they were kind of like a I was like, my friend was like, why are you not applying to Harvard? I was like, I don't want to. I don't think I'm going to get in. So I kind of just like tacked them onto my list midway through. And I don't think I did anything that special when I was applying to that program versus others. I know, I guess being on the other side now, having gone through the program and heard little tidbits of what they look for. I mean, they said this to us. I don't know if this is truly what happens during admissions, but they say that they like people who don't go a traditional path and like have, had experience doing something else. It's not just like undergrad, MPH, this, and they've known that this is what they wanted to do their whole life. Like they like seeing a little bit of deviation from that. So I guess that's something you can try to talk about in your personal statement or your statement of purpose. Um, yeah. I don't really know. I don't have any like Harvard specific advice because I really don't know. It also just depends on who's like reading your application that year and who the other candidates are. Like at the end of the day, there's like no secret like key to getting in somewhere. It's very subjective, which I know is probably not what you want to hear, which is why I tell people like it's good to have some dream schools, but you got to apply widely because you just never
Yep.
know like, who's going to take you every year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay, what were your other questions?
Yeah, that's very helpful, and thank you for that. And I completely agree. I do think wide variety is helpful. In terms of my other question, what was it like? What was the program itself like? Was it anything that you like thought? really helped your experience throughout getting your PhD at this school?
Man, that's a big question.
Mhm.
Well, COVID happened during it. So I feel like for me,
Oh,
it was like
wow.
a very interesting experience. Um, Honestly, like I look back on my PhD years very fondly. That's why I have a whole YouTube channel dedicated to it and why I like really empower students to apply and help them in the process. Um, Like, I don't know. I mean, obviously, again, we could sit here all day and I can give you all the nitty-gritty of, oh, yeah, this was weird, but I got over the, I don't know if you could make your question a little more specific, maybe is there like a certain area, like something a little bit more focused that you want to ask me about versus just like my PhD experience in general? Because I don't know how to really like hone in on anything other than to tell you
Yeah,
that
sure.
all it's definitely like it had its up. It was a roller coaster, but a pretty smooth one, at the end of the day.
That's good to hear. Well, to maybe a more specific question, like in terms of being in Boston, I know you said that you kind of ventured out to other research groups and networked. Did it make it more helpful for the location that you were in, or is
I
there something that? Mhm.
I mean, I think so. I mean, I'm sure no matter where you end up, there are other research groups but like, I think that is the benefit of Harvard is that you're right next to MGH, Boston Children. So it was super easy for me to kind of because my mentors were like already working and collaborating with some of these people. So it was easy for them to then introduce me. Same with like, I didn't work with anyone at BU, but there were people at BU too that sometimes got brought up. And then I worked with people at Boston Children's because one of someone that was teaching a course at my school was a Boston Children's hospital researcher. So, it's just there's kind of like natural connections that are already embedded within the Harvard system. So that was kind of helpful. I do think that is kind of a strength of going to a place like Harvard. I don't know if that exists elsewhere in as many ways, but you'll definitely be able to find those connections. Like your
That's
mentors will
very
know people and they can always introduce you.
That's good to hear. Thank you for that. Yeah, I that was practically all of my questions. It was very helpful, and
Oh,
overall, I do feel more
sorry.
confident.
To answer your last question too, I think also now with post-COVID Zoom being the norm, it's a lot easier to like forge research collaborations because you don't always have to meet in person. Well, I wish you the best. I really hope that this call made you feel more comfortable applying, more confident applying. Based on your experiences, what you told me, I definitely think you have the potential for a strong application. I can't say for sure because I haven't seen your stuff, but stay hopeful. I'm hopeful for you. If there's anything else I can do for you in this process, I'm totally here for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you ever hear a slightly negative comment from someone else, run it by me to fact check before think about it too much. Okay? Of
Thank you, Jess. I appreciate that a lot.
course. All right. Well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.